Today, the world is indeed going through very difficult times. COVID-19 has revealed all the vulnerable points of the modern society. At the same time, the current crisis gave us a chance to reflect on the profound causes of such overwhelming vulnerability, and much more importantly, a chance to take right decisions and actions on our future. Perhaps the biggest problem of the modern humanity is that our vision and thinking are fragmentary. Trying to address challenges, we tend to look for solutions from conventional standpoints or one dimension only. The goal of this presentation is to contribute modestly to more integral vision and understanding of the acute issues of food security and food sovereignty. We will try to use the example of nomadic indigenous peoples of Pamir, Tien-Shan and Sayan-Altai biocultural region to link food security with other security dimensions, show the importance and acute issues of revival of traditional or local systems of food production, and outline the scope of work to be done in the nearest future to turn pilot initiatives on revival of indigenous livestock breeding and promotion of agroecology in general into powerful support for efficient environmental and food security policymaking. Golden Hoof Collaborative is a cooperation of several organizations and individual experts representing 7 indigenous peoples inhabiting 3 linked Eurasian mountain systems called Pamir, Tien-Shan and Sayan-Altai. This collaborative was established in 2017 in the framework of the Permanent Forum of Indigenous Peoples of Pamir, Tien-Shan and Sayan-Altai and received support from the Agroecology Fund. The collaborative aims to revive indigenous livestock breeding as a key factor of spiritual, cultural, environmental and economic security of indigenous peoples of the given region. The project has 3 components: revival of gene pool of indigenous livestock, reactivation of related traditional agroecological technologies, and consolidation of indigenous leaders around the issues of spiritually oriented and ecological models of development. First 2 phases of the project were focused on revival of the indigenous Buryat co-using genetic material from the cross-border communities of Mongolia, and study of the indigenous Kyrgyz horse using genetic material from Kyrgyzstan itself. The upcoming 3rd phase will add other 5 indigenous peoples of the region and focus on exploration of their agroecological potential and development of a roadmap for further joint revival of nomadic livestock breeding. The mountain chains of Pamir, Tien-Shan and Sayan-Altai are an important part of the Eurasian mountain system. Pamir and Tien-Shan mountain ranges are among the highest mountains of Eurasia along with the Himalayas. This geographic zone comprises over 5 altitudinal belts and has over 30 ecosystems. Historically, the area was inhabited by Turkic and Mongolian language-speaking nomadic peoples with highly advanced spiritual and environmental worldview, strong cultural traditions and stable material self-provision system based on nomadic livestock breeding. Today, like many other indigenous communities of the world, indigenous peoples of the Pamir, Tien-Shan and Sayan-Altai area clearly understand, through their own complicated history and in the light of the modern global challenges, the importance of reviving 3 basic dimensions of security: spiritual, environmental, and material. Spiritual and cultural identity of each indigenous people is first of all about certain levels of consciousness, including faith, morals, and environmental principles of life. The people's capacity to preserve, encode, and pass such levels of consciousness to younger generations is a golden key to their further existence. Nature, lands, and health of indigenous people lie in the heart of environmental security. The people's capacity to preserve, restore, and rationally use natural resources of indigenous territories and maintain good health is indeed a great achievement in our unsafe world with its severe environmental challenges. Food and economic sovereignty is another highly important aspect of well-being of indigenous people. The people's capacity to preserve, operate, and strengthen traditional systems of material self-provision and economic self-sufficiency reflects their strong foothold or presence in social and economic systems of the region or the country they live in. The COVID-19 crisis has clearly demonstrated that indigenous peoples of the target region, as well as modern society in general, are very vulnerable in all three dimensions mentioned above. The COVID-19 outbreak has affected us in almost every aspect of our lives. The strongest impact was on food security. This is particularly true for Kyrgyzstan, located in Tien-Shan biocultural zone, and Tajikistan, located in Pamir area. Russia, which includes the Sayan-Altai area, was able to mitigate softly food security impacts thanks to the abundance of inner resources and high mobilization capacity built through many years of international sanctions. In small countries, the pandemic had an immediate impact on nutrition system. We could observe reduction of access to basic food supplies, decrease of purchasing capacity of population, and emergence of new socially vulnerable population groups needing direct food assistance. All this led to lower quality and availability of daily nutrition. While urban areas formed the main risk group, local communities engaged in agricultural production were in a much better position. Another COVID-19 impact on food security is a serious damage to local systems of food production in the current agricultural season. The pandemic and related lockdown measures disrupted seasonal agricultural works, logistical systems of trade and supply, and small business support programs. All this led to a significant decrease in both quantity and quality of local agricultural produce of the current season. Crop farmers suffered the most, while local livestock breeding communities were in a better position. And finally, the COVID-19 pandemic inflicted severe damage to long-term economic opportunities and capacity of population. People are unable to repay bank loans and pay taxes. Long-term business support systems are disrupted. Debts of population and governments are growing. These challenges are aggravated by natural cataclysms such as grasshopper plagues and natural disasters. However, despite all the hardships caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, we also can observe some positive impacts. We can see unbelievable solidarity and mutual support among people in these difficult times. People get more and more interested in traditional culture and spirituality, healthy lifestyles, and connection with nature. As for food security and sovereignty, people have understood clearly that in situations of emergency, when all the artificial social, economic, and political structures collapse, local communities always stay strong, capable, and vital. We realize that local communities and grassroots initiatives, which are often underestimated in normal life, in fact fulfill the function of a safety bag in crisis situations. Central Asian countries unraveled the strategic role of well-organized agriculture and adequate national food security strategy. Our friends and colleagues from Buryatia and other indigenous communities in Russia note an increase in the number of ordinary people seeking to invest in small-scale livestock farming or engage in home gardening. Even this simple analysis of COVID-19's consequences shows how interconnected three dimensions of security are and how important it is today to deal with the crisis integrally. In this context, it is obvious that the food system is closely tied to value systems of the society and ecosystems of the earth, from local to global levels. And during this process of transformation of food system, indigenous peoples of the world could provide incredible support in the form of environmental and moral values encoded in their cultures, unique agroecological approaches and technologies presented in their traditional knowledge, and vast human capacity and resources of their local communities. And the final result of this transformation process could be emergence of a new food system, the system based on moral values and profound respect to human being and nature. Historical experience of indigenous peoples of the region of our collaborative shows that removing even one indigenous animal species from the life of an indigenous people can launch an irreversible cascade of changes in spiritual, cultural identity, natural ecosystems, and systems of material provision of indigenous people. In Kyrgyzstan, the loss of the Kyrgyz horse resulted in the loss of high mountain pastoralism and effective management of mountain pastures, because wandering in high-altitude regions is possible only with this aboriginal horse, which had a range of unique genetic qualities. In Buryatia, the loss of the Buratko resulted in the loss of steppe pastoralism and effective steppe pasture management, as the ecological balance of steppes can be maintained only with this aboriginal breed based on its unique genetic traits. And in both cases, the effect also was shifts in spiritual and cultural aspects of life and serious damage to material provision and economic independence of these two indigenous peoples. Indigenous nomadic livestock breeding as a special kind of agricultural production has a range of important advantages. Aboriginal livestock breeds have been adapting to local ecosystems for hundreds or even thousands years and cannot be replaced by any of non-native breeds. They are part of these local ecosystems and do not need much care from the herders. A one-family household is usually capable of handling large herds of indigenous livestock, staying relatively independent from the external environment. Another important advantage of indigenous livestock breeding is its pastoral or nomadic technologies. Traditional nomadic agricultural technologies are based on livestock grazing that address concurrently all livestock breeding issues in a comprehensive, effective, and natural or environmentally friendly manner. Experienced herders use 4 types of rotation: rotation of pastures, rotation of various kinds of livestock, rotation of direction of herd movement, and rotation of herd stations. These are only few examples of a traditional technology package used by nomadic people for centuries. The main consequence of application of such technologies is perfectly pure and healthy food product. Economically, indigenous livestock breeding is gaining popularity among farmers thanks to high productivity of indigenous breeds and high energy value of their milk and meat. The Buryat experience shows that Buryatko has a number of advantages over stall-fed cattle breeds, for example Simmental cattle breed, in terms of various parameters. Buryatkos are cheaper to keep and pay off quickly, bringing profit within a year. The Kyrgyz horse can be a source of up to 6 different products. Its milk and meat have unique taste and healing properties. However, if we succeed in reviving sustainable populations of indigenous animal breeds and reintroduce those breeds in real-life agriculture using all the advantages of indigenous livestock breeding, there is still a range of issues that need to be examined closely and addressed systematically to ensure that indigenous livestock breeding will become a robust component of food security system. Even a preliminary review of agricultural legislations of countries in which target indigenous peoples live shows that indigenous nomadic livestock breeding is not a priority for agriculture and accordingly for food security system. For example, in Russia, only 2 indigenous people have legislations related to pasture-based livestock breeding. In other nomadic indigenous communities of Russia, pasture-based livestock breeding has no official agricultural or legislative status. Similarly, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan do not have enough attention to the revival of and reintroduction of indigenous animal breeds into existing pasture-based husbandry systems. This means that significant efforts are yet to be made to build agri-technological hubs or pasture laboratories for indigenous livestock, promote live networks of real herders, and advocate for pasture-based and aboriginal animal husbandry at the national level. Pasture lands are a strategic resource for indigenous livestock farming. Increased interest to pasture-based animal husbandry may cause many issues in relation to pasture management. For example, in Russia, livestock farmers can take agricultural lands on lease, sometimes buy out agricultural lands or use lands as part of governmental programs on business support or traditional management of natural resources. In Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, pastures are accessible on lease terms only. With time, it will be inevitably necessary to optimize pasture management in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan and clarify agricultural status of indigenous pasture territories in Russia. Despite changes caused by the COVID-19 crisis, indigenous livestock production will face corporate resistance and limitations of the old food system. To reach a serious production level and keep all positive parameters of locality, livestock herders will need support in the post-production phase, namely with logistical mini-hubs, customer services, and networking with processing industries to sell skin, wool, and other secondary livestock products. For instance, one of the problems faced by livestock farmers in Buryatia is the lack of compact systems for meat freezing and refrigerated transportation of meat. For a society struggling with environmental challenges, it is highly important to continue comprehensive research on positive experience of human-to-nature interactions, a perfect example of which is indigenous livestock breeding. Conventional science, in collaboration with traditional knowledge custodians, should provide all possible support to herders with studying ecosystems, including soils, flora and fauna, microorganisms, water, indigenous animals, and traditional agroecological technologies. Livestock farmers are not able to do this on their own, but they will be happy to host such research and make a great contribution to the mitigation of global climate challenges. A reliable inventory of spiritual and cultural traditions of nomadic peoples is required. These traditions could be an effective tool for transforming the consciousness of modern humankind that got trapped in a materialistic mindset and rational consumeristic lifestyle. Today, it is vital to ensure that non-material heritage of nomadic peoples is adapted and reintroduced at all levels of upbringing and education of their younger generations. Without a morally strong and environmentally responsible new generation, any human activity will sooner or later sink in greed, competition, and hostility. Therefore, to become a truly prolific and valuable component of the food system, indigenous livestock farming should be revived in all dimensions. This is the only way to unlock the full potential of indigenous livestock breeding, and any localization that can take place in agricultural production and product dissemination systems should be based on cultural traditions, agroecological technologies, and ecosystems of concrete local communities. In other words, the food policy should be linked to practical restoration of biocultural diversity and environmental recovery of the earth. To make pilot initiatives on revival of indigenous livestock breeding and promotion of agroecology in general an effective and useful tool for environmental and food policy making at multiple levels, it is critical today to combine experimental practical activities with advanced research and continuous spiritual growth. As never before, today we need more longer-term integrated and synchronized inter-regional projects to enable in-depth research and applied practical work in the field of indigenous livestock breeding. Collaborative approach proved to be a very effective way of cooperation. It is also very important to promote the culture of partnership between the donor and indigenous organizations and transcend the boundaries of donor-beneficiary relations. Unfortunately, traditional agricultural technologies, despite their high importance in the context of modern challenges, still barely get even half of the attention that is given to the modern agricultural industry. It is critical today to turn advanced conventional science towards indigenous peoples and what they do to combat global challenges. Moreover, every effort should be made to facilitate collaboration between scientists and custodians of traditional culture and knowledge, to overcome arrogance and lack of trust in the non-rational aspects of life, intuition and visionary capacity of people who closely interact with, respect and care about the nature. The COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the transition of spiritually oriented worldviews and more environmentally responsible lifestyle. Toxic and abnormal value systems of modern humankind have brought the society to all sorts of catastrophes, while the return to natural values such as family, community, nature, moderation, and inward peace gives at least some hope for a better future. It is important today to activate all the sources of true spirituality and use them to develop applied culture or values-based indicators of well-being that embrace all dimensions of security. Food security and sovereignty discourses that have dominated in the international community in the past decade have become totally meaningless after the COVID-19 crisis. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, small countries and indigenous peoples around the world were deeply disappointed with the international food security system, because it was initially focused on big players of international food programs, did not take into account moral and ecological aspects of food provision, and was never free from geopolitics. Pre-COVID-19 discourses were the discourses around consumption and power, thus the discourses on dependent, exploitative, and dominant attitude of humans to nature, and disrespectful or simply geopolitical attitude of rich people to the poor. Maybe today, with the worldwide and extraordinary COVID-19 experience in mind, together we will be able to launch a transformative process to change the existing food system into a system that would mainstream the revival of self-sufficient and sustainable communities based on natural ecosystems, a system that would stand on environmental indicators, health of natural ecosystems, and social responsibility. Perhaps now is really time for a serious change.